Go. Just
Sure.
take it anywhere you want to go, and I'll try to fake my end.
Okay. I like it. We're already off to a good start. It's great to meet you. Thank you so much for taking a minute out today. I appreciate it.
My pleasure.
So, before we get into your world of being a serial entrepreneur and author, I want to begin with this. 6 years ago, this pandemic was changing the world, changing so much about the way that we did things. How did you get through that COVID era, and how has it changed the way that you approach life and work today?
Interesting. I haven't been asked that question.
Yeah.
We lost about 20% of our business that year in the main business that I'm in. And but the government, I've never said this, but the government turned out to be our friend in that they sent out all those ERC checks,
Yeah.
and we survived without them. But as a result of the pandemic, we wound up having a huge cash infusion into our business that didn't cost us any money. So my
Yeah.
story is a little bit different. I'm not sure that's what you were going for, but
No, I think there was a lot of positives that came out of it. There was woe, it was a global emergency, but I think there was a lot of people that saw silver linings. You know, the earth slowed down, we recalibrated the way that we were going to see the future. And just in this situation, there was monies that were doled out that helped people not sink because otherwise it would have been bad. I mean, there's a lot of people that saved their businesses off those monies.
well, we actually had a meeting one morning because we didn't know if we would be declared an essential business.
Yeah.
And if we had not been declared an essential business, we would have had to lay off the majority of our workforce. But within the week, we were declared an essential business, and so in the heating and air conditioning business, we were allowed to stay open in Texas. I can't imagine very many things more essential
Yeah.
than air conditioning in the summertime. So I mean, we had really dark days. As it turned out, it was a boon to our business.
So, speaking of business, let's get into what you do today on a regular basis. I'm going to put you in front of 13-year-olds. It's career day, and the kids want to know what you do for a living. How do you explain that?
I love to talk about who an entrepreneur is,
Yeah.
and I've done a lot of that career day stuff. I used to just talk about the heating and air conditioning business, and I kind of looked at a bunch of blank faces. But I developed this little fake lemonade stand and have them run through the inner workings of their lemonade stand, and you get their attention, and they love it. And it's kind of, for some of them, it's their first introduction into what an entrepreneur really does and how an entrepreneur thinks.
So, give me a snapshot of your career. If you were to look in the rearview mirror and go from your beginnings of your career to where you are today, how would you synthesize that?
I began with a large real estate developer called Trammell Crow. I don't know if you knew of
Yeah.
Trammell Crow. We were
Uh-huh.
in Kansas City.
Yeah.
That was back in 1973. Um, I, I I went through three downturns with them. I wound up becoming a partner. Was there for a total of 10 years. Developed industrial property primarily in the Dallas-Fort Worth area. Decided that real estate was neither my passion nor my future. And I really wanted to prove to myself that I could be successful independent of the Trammell Crow formula, which was dynamite. It was a great launching pad, but I left, sold my interest back to my partners, began purchasing and starting businesses, and I've done that for 45 years. I became very aware of the need for leadership training in small businesses, taking basically blue collar people and turning them into skilled leaders. I did that successfully to the point that they're now running my companies, and I retired on December 31st.
Wow. So, was Ross Perot from the Dallas area?
He was.
Okay. So I realized probably about 20 years ago how he made a lot of his money in his empire. There is a parcel of land that now is called the Kaufman Center for Performing Arts. It's a beautiful building in Kansas City. And someone told me years ago when they were developing downtown, Ross Perot owns that parcel of land. So he would come in to these downtown areas and he would swoop up these parcels in downtown areas that were prized areas that would eventually get developed. And I had no idea that was a part of what he did. And I was like, man, he's down in Texas. Why is he up in Kansas City? But it was everywhere. I mean, he went everywhere and did that.
He was, and he was a very bright guy. He used to tell the story that he could make his sales quota at, I think it was IBM or EDA, no, IBM. and he could make his sales quota for the year by the end of January.
Wow.
And then he just, he's just one of those unique human beings. And, from a real estate standpoint, he bought a huge parcel up north of Fort Worth, um, arranged for an airport to be built. It looked like it was in the middle of nowhere. I was up there the other day, and so we're probably 25 or 30 years later, and you can't get through the area. It's so crowded and so
Wow.
developed.
Wow.
Just some people have that vision. I was not one of them.
Well, yeah, and that was the thing about him. He did. He had that vision. Someone told me that used to work with him, and I think they were really close. They were one of his personal assistants. If there was a client in the room, he would always take his business card and hand it over and write in front of him his phone number and say, if you ever need anything, call me. But I guess if they did call him, there was going to be hell to pay with some of these people, depending on the circumstance. But I find it interesting to preen into those little details because at the end of the day, being a good entrepreneur, being a good businessman requires that personal touch like that. And that was probably
Unquestionably.
hallmark to his success. So I got to know when you were 13 years old,
Mhm.
what did you want to be when you grew up? What was your dream job?
An orthodontist.
Okay.
And it was deep thinking that led me to that decision. I had braces on my teeth, and I knew that the orthodontist who was doing my work lived pretty well and played golf every Friday. And I said that I need some of that. And I went through one semester of college chemistry before changing my major to business.
There's an interesting talking to so many entrepreneurs, there's these wide swings. You have people that grew up around entrepreneurship, they watch their parents do it, and then you have other people that just grabbed this pie in the sky and decided to go. It was always somewhere within them. And then you have that gray area. Where did you fall? What were the skills? What did you see consciously or subconsciously growing up that allowed you to become a success?
My dad was a very strong individual, hardworking, but he was a school administrator and he was successful at that, but he was frustrated by it. And so he would always have something going on the side, whether he was building a house or, buying a restaurant franchise or whatever. And none of them were wildly successful, but I suspect it was in my genes. He told me that I could be anything except a school administrator. He didn't want me to go through that frustration. And I knew fairly early that I wanted to own my own business. Now, I thought it was going to be an orthodontia practice. It turned out not to be, but I had a sense all along that I wanted to be a small business person.
So who was your hero? Who's been consistently your inspirational force throughout your life and career?
In my book, I devote a chapter to the importance of mentors, and my first one was Trammell Crow himself, and I had direct access to him occasionally, and it's still meaningful to me. I still find myself saying, "What would Mr. Crow do in this situation?" And I've had that all along, and I've been very fortunate. When I list them in my book, I probably listed 10 or 12, and I could have gone on for that many more. And at various points, various people have been very instrumental in my life. Um, Over the long run, there's two or three, including entrepreneurial friends who I might play golf with, who were successful, maybe more successful than me. And I have talked many times about kind of a mid-course correction I had in my 40s, where I realized that after a pretty fast start, people were passing me by. And I kind of had to take stock and see what I needed to do. And I watched my friends and say, they're handling this situation differently than I am, and they're having success and I'm not. And I made a real change. I also reconnected with my faith around age 50. That's a huge influence in my life and has been for the last 27 years. So lots of answers to that question.
Yeah, no, I like it. And I'm curious on that entrepreneurial path, there's always some level of risk. There's that
Mhm.
failure, there's success. What was the biggest risk that you took in your career?
The biggest risk is when I bought the broken down heating and air conditioning company in 1988. And I knew that it was in trouble. I'd done a pretty thorough analysis of it, but I learned after I was working through the final documents, they were 2 weeks from being liquidated by the bank. They were ready to be shut down, and I wasn't quite prepared for that. I thought I was 39 years old at the time. I thought it was a 2-year turnaround, and I was prepared to go without salary and stuff while I did that. It took 5 years, and my purchase of that company coincided with the banking collapse of the late '80s, early '90s, and so I was not only fighting a company that had lost most of its business, but I was fighting the economic climate at the same time. That was gut wrenching.
Wow. Well, you've seen more of those probably throughout your career with '08 and all of these others. How do you survive those?
I think because of what I learned along the way, and as I said, when I was in the real estate business, I went through three, not as significant, but I went through three pretty significant ones. Um, like our, parents or grandparents who went through the Depression, that leaves a mark, and you become much more conservative. And so I was always careful to understand that I couldn't imagine the worst scenario. I could model bad scenarios, but it could get worse than I could imagine. And so I tried to always prepare for that. I've said to many people, I've never in my life had enough cash or had too much cash. I've had enough, but I've never had too much. But I became much more aware of my cash position and my ability to weather the storm long term.
So you mentioned this crossroads in your 40s when you saw people passing you by. And I think about entrepreneurs now, minds like Elon Musk that aren't thinking about Earth anymore. They're thinking about outer space and all these other grandiose ideas of invention, like the Wright brothers were thinking. If you could meet one of those, entrepreneurs alive on the planet right now that are really doing things in a unbelievable way, who would you love to meet?
Ooh, I think Elon's too smart for me to have a conversation, so I wouldn't. To be honest with you, I'd still love to sit down and have a conversation with Warren Buffett,
Yeah.
because he is mentally so sharp, and he's just been able to do things that defied logic and defied gravity, financial gravity, and he's just done it, and he's so plain spoken and wise. I'd love to have that conversation.
He still goes to the same McDonald's. He uses change in his cup. He's in the
Yep.
same house, the same car. And I think about those things. We have this mentality. I don't know if it's the consumer gene that's been put in us as Americans, the capitalistic thing, but it's like we always have to be groomed to get more and upgrade and do all of this. But he just doesn't do that. He's kind of abated that system.
Sam Walton was another one who fit that profile. And
Yeah.
obviously, Sam Walton was a very smart man. And the transition of his company, after he left, is really quite, I mean, it's obviously been successful, but it's a very different company than the company that he envisioned it being.
So let me ask you this. Being successful and highly driven with this vision that you've had over the years, what gets you up every day? What is it that gets you up to not only transform lives and do business well, but to take care of your soul on a personal basis? What is that energy every day for you?
Empowering people. As I came out of my transition in my mid 40s, one of the things that I learned was it's about the people. It's about other people. It's not about me. And I committed to, I'd always done a good job of building a people-centric culture in my companies, but I got even more serious about it. My wife is an absolute rock star on relationships, and I was not, and I'm still not in her league. But I learned about being relational and the power of being relational. And so I became far more involved in the lives of our employees and my friends and family than I was previously, and it paid big dividends. I love the idea that I can tell stories about people who never thought they would be in a leadership role, and I helped them along the way become leaders. And now in retirement and with the book and the training course, that's what I'm doing every day, and I love talking about it. I especially love doing it.
So, of all of the lives that you've touched and changed, what's been one of the most memorable letters or feedback that you've gotten from somebody?
So there's an employee that came to us 19 years ago. His goal was to work for 6 months, earn enough money to travel back to Mexico. 19 years later, he is one of the strongest voices in our company and a part of the leadership team that now runs the companies. Helping him along the way, step by step, to become not just a leader in our company, but a leader in his family, a better father, just and to enjoy life, not only the financial success that he's had with his promotions, but his feeling that he is in control of his life, where he was not in control of his life previously. Those are the stories that keep me going, and I look forward to being able to share more of those.
All right, Rich. So before we get into your book, the idea of writing this book to actually holding it in your hand, when you were growing up, who were the authors? What were the books? What was the literature that moved you?
I wasn't a reader.
Okay.
In fact, I cover that in the book that, all of I realized that the smart people that I knew in school were all readers and I was not, but I just didn't enjoy reading. And I was pulled aside by my first boss at Trammell Crow, who was a 23-year-old Harvard MBA with an undergrad degree from MIT. And he said, Rich, you don't know much about business. But I think if you'll start reading 5 business periodicals every week and read the Wall Street Journal every day, said I think you'll fill in the gap. You're a reasonably bright guy, and I think you can fill in the gap that way. Well, I began a program of reading then that I continue today. The difference is that I read on everything now, and I read from different points of view so that I understand it. As a leader, my job is to influence people. The more I know about people, the more I know about the world, the better influencer I am. So I've read a lot of books along the way that influenced me, but I wouldn't say that early in my career there were authors who influenced me. I started out reading a lot of biographies of successful people, and that was cool. But then okay, those are kind of getting repetitive. And I read, my rule is that if I read a book on customer service today, I won't read another customer service book until I've read 4 other books on different subjects. And so I just keep the rotation going.
Yeah, for sure. So let's say you had a dream tonight. You ran into the 18-year-old version of you, ready to go out and change the world. And you walked into the room and there was a film projector and you clicked play and it was like a 60-second highlight reel of the life you've lived. Would that young version of you believe your life turned out this way?
He would believe it turned out that way because I always expected to be successful. He would not have been able to predict anywhere near the turns that in the journey, and he would not understand that how important it was for me to become relational along the way because that's not who I was at 18. That's not how I was raised.
So would you give that young version of you any advice?
I'd tell him it's about people. It's not and it's not the you people, it's the they people.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's not the guy you're looking at in the mirror that matters. If you treat people, empower people, listen to people, uh, you'll be shocked at how influential you'll become in their lives.
So a lot of people know you as a very successful and strong businessman. And if you were to walk into a room of everybody that's known you in that sense throughout your career, and you could go to a podium and tell them a fun story about you, maybe the first concert you went to, a sporting experience, a travel experience, jumping out of an airplane, outrunning a bear, a fun story that would humanize you a little bit to that room. What fun story would you tell that group?
Um, it's a painful story. But it was funny to everybody else but me. To show you how not relational I was in my freshman year of college, I was a prankster and I thought everything I was doing was really funny. I did not read the room and I didn't understand how irritating it was getting to people. And one night I was in my dorm room and all of a sudden the door breaks open and about 8 guys came in, tied me up, stripped me down to my underwear, and took me down and dumped me on a street in downtown Seattle. And and I mean it's horrible to think that
Yeah.
I was that disliked, but I was. And I mean they thought it was funny. I kind of made my way back and I wasn't smart enough or wasn't savvy enough at the time to realize what that really said. I just thought it was their version of a practical joke. It's only later that I realized how much animosity I had engendered in those people.
You know, I think about I have a jazz radio show and I think about Charlie Parker, one of the seminal moments early on. He played so bad, the drummer threw a cymbal and it hit the ground and it totally destroyed him. And I think about all of those moments. The anti-hero can be just as potent as the hero in your life. It can totally turn you around and it can be that change that we need. And sometimes it needs to be cold water, you know?
Yeah. It, when you're when you're on a successful track, it's very hard to recognize those deficiencies. It's only when you hit a bump in the road that it kind of, I guess it, not everybody has to, but it certainly caused me to reflect. It took me 5 years to rebuild myself in my mid 40s. And so it went from about 45 to 50 before I really started on the right path. I lost my courage as an entrepreneur. It was not a fun time, but it was the most pivotal time in my life.
But I think all of us at some certain point hit that midlife crisis. You know, there's no real age, but there's this thing where you run so hard and all of these different versions of you merge and you just got to figure it out so that you can, be stronger as you move forward, you know?
Yeah.
Uh, so let me ask you this. After everything that you've been through, the rebuilding, the success, and everything up to this point, the evolution, what are you ultimately the happiest about, the proudest of?
About 3 years ago, I was out for a walk, and I don't know why I had this thought, but all of a sudden I said, "Do you realize that you're at peace for the first time in your life?" And it was and number one, I never sought peace. I think an entrepreneur doesn't even think peace is possible because ours are not peaceful existences for the most part.
Yeah.
And as I thought about why I was feeling that way, it was a combination of financial success, my family was in good shape, great relationships, and my faith, which had become a bigger and bigger part of my life. Those three things led me to a position of peace. And now that I have peace, I'd sure hate to go back. But
Yeah.
I mean, that's a huge deal for me.
So at the end of the day, Rich, everyone has a perception of you, family, friends, clients, colleagues, employees, but you run the show. What's your perception of you? Who do you think you are?
I think I am who you see now. I don't think I always was, but I think I'm a very transparent person. I'm happy to share with you my failures. If you're an employee, for instance, they know who I am, and they know that when they see me outside the business, they'll see the same guy. So I think my friends, my employees, my family would say I am who I say that I am.
So if you could get into a time machine and go back in time and see one event in human history, where would you go? What would you love to see?
Man, you're asking all these deep questions, Joe. This is hard. Um, I'd like to understand more about World War II and the amount of sacrifice that families who stayed here, obviously the soldiers who went places, the guys who landed on beaches with very little chance of survival. I think that's a mentality that we don't understand today. Um, I'd love to. I didn't really want to be there, but I would love to understand the mentality that was present then because I think we've lost it.
Yeah, I agree. So, who should be getting Growing Your Own? Who is that tailored for? Everybody at this point to delve further into your book and your world. Who should be doing this?
The book came out of a training course that I developed to bring motivated employees into leadership roles so that they could ultimately take over the company. It was successful. During the course of that training, I began writing blogs to the leadership team. There were 8 people on the team at that time. And my thought was that if I can get them talking about these leadership principles, we'll move this thing forward. One thing that I have found along the way is when you're dealing with very low level leaders or wannabe leaders, they don't possess a lot of intellectual curiosity outside their field. So, I might be talking to a great technician, but that technician is not studying leadership. He's studying how to become a better technician. So, my job was to get them out of that zone and into a zone where we could break through whatever was holding them back as a leader. Those blogs ultimately became the book. I wrote them for 2 years, And the employees used the blogs as a reference guide. And the blogs are written in what became 2.5-page chapters, each one containing a different leadership principle. And we all learn differently. I am a guy who learns by reading a little bit and then doing, and reading a little bit and then doing. That's exactly how the book is written, because the people I trained to become leaders learned that way. They're not going to, as good as a John Maxwell book is, they're not going to read John Maxwell and put it in place.
Yeah.
So this fills a void for early stage leaders, small business owners, and wannabe leaders that, frankly, because I looked, this information is not available in this form anywhere else. So this book, it's 130 pages long, contains 35 2.5-page chapters, and it is for the person who never thought of themselves as a leader and wants to start learning leadership principles.
So growingyourown.net, is that the best place to go?
That's where to go. Or if people want to just connect directly with me, rich@growingyourown.net is my email, and I love to interact with people. I have time on my hands in retirement. This is what I really like doing.
All right, sounds great. I will put all these links in the show notes. Rich, what a joy. Thank you, sir. Thank you for your time. Thank you for your story, and best of luck with everything.
Thanks for the great questions. This was a really interesting interview. I appreciate it.
Absolutely.